Okay. So this is an very interesting book that came across in my life maybe about 12 years ago. But it was triggered as a child. We used to do a lot of journeys by car, and my father was a very very particular about maps and reading maps, and he would get us kids in the car to read the Survey of India maps. And several times he would talk about the Great Indian Trigonometrical Survey, which of course as a child registered but went away. We didn't talk about it. Many years later, when I was walking through a bookstore and I chanced on this book, that old memory came back. So I picked it up and read what I thought was a very lovely account of something that is so important to our heritage. It's a very, very fascinating account of probably one of the greatest scientific events that has happened in our country. And it was called the Great Indian Trigonometrical Survey. And the point is, it's about what is called the Great Arc is really the main route on which the survey was done, which is the 70th meridian. And they followed this right from Kanyakumari up to Mussoorie, where finally it ended. But hidden behind that, nobody realized, was actually the fact that they were also doing some scientific work on the Earth's curvature. At that time, there was a lot of discussion about whether the Earth was spherical or whether it's an oblate spheroid or whatever it is. So many people, including, had discussed how the compression would be, how does it look, and so forth. So apart from the fact that they were surveying the Indian subcontinent, they were also trying to measure the curvature of the Earth. And what it did was, it for the first time really mapped the entire Indian subcontinent, and it created a platform on which a lot of other surveys could take off on a very accurate way. The great part of this is, if you look at all the accounts that John Keyes takes you through, amazing accuracy of a survey that was done almost 200 years ago. For example, they would tally the triangulation work, and we can talk about that, with actual measurements on the ground, which is called a baseline. And something, on the Dehradun sector, about 140 miles, the difference was only 7.2 inches. That's the kind of accuracy they were able to achieve. It also was the time when nobody realized that the Himalayas were the highest peaks in the world. And this survey, at the end of it, when they reached the Himalayas, were able to establish that the Himalayas were actually the highest peaks. They identified the height of Everest. And Everest actually was named after George Everest, who actually carried through the second half of the survey and led the survey of India as well. And imagine all this happening 200 years ago. It's not, latest techniques, like latest technology, but meticulous work 200 years ago. And this entire exercise is spread over 40 years. Okay. Key himself is a very interesting writer. He's been a historian, he's a reader, presenter, and so forth, and written a lot of books of this region, about India, about the subcontinent, and also somewhere in the far east. This is what Mohit was also talking about. One of the books, of course, is The Great Arc. And what he does is, it's a very easy and engaging style. So it's very comfortable to read. In fact, it's easy to put down and pick up and start off wherever you left. And he holds the language is nice enough and good enough, and the storytelling is so good that it holds your attention quite well as you read through the book. What is also very interesting about this gentleman is that he does a lot of research and he presents a lot of detail. And with that detail, you can actually quite easily immerse yourself. You can recreate the scenario in which the account is set. And when you read through this book, you get yourself into the entire atmosphere 200 years ago, when such a major event, a major exercise was being carried out in our subcontinent. It's a very slim book. There are 11 chapters. It's only 177 pages. it's not the pages that determine how you absorb the book. It's really the content and the detail. And if you sit down and go over the detail and relish it, I think you'd enjoy this a lot more. So don't rush through it. If you read this book, take it as it comes, put it down, read it in your own time and style. And I think each time I'm quite comfortable when you read it, you will find yourself getting back into the same atmosphere that you need to be to imagine what has been going on the ground as this whole story unfolds. What he does is, in each of the chapters that are there, he gives you a different window into the entire exercise. So it's not as though it's a sequential. It sort of gives a picture at one end and another end and so forth, and he sort of goes back and forth. I don't know, sometimes like something like how a cinema director might go back and recall something and again go back to the current. So that way it sort of creates a very nice storyline and a picture and understanding of what happens. It is slightly mathematical, trigonometry is, but it's good if you understand trigonometry, you have some base in it. But it doesn't matter. Even if you don't need to stress yourself too much, except if you read a little more in detail, you'll understand and appreciate what is really the groundwork, the level of groundwork that was done. Right? There are three important characters I want to talk about. There's a lot of text here, but I'll just give you a background. The hero of the story actually is a gentleman called William Lambton. He was the one who actually put up the idea of the trigonometric survey at a time when the British were actually, they already had their first wins in India, taken over Bengal and so forth, and they were getting very avaricious about taking over the country. And what they needed was a lot of maps to be able to understand how they could manage this country and how they would actually move around. So he actually started out, he came from a very poor family, but he was very bright and seems to have got through in merit in school, and on the same basis through merit got a commission in the army. It was very interesting to understand at that point. I did a little bit of side reading, and I found that in that age, most of the commissions in the British armies or the colonial armies were actually bought by people. They used to pay money and take a commission, and even up to the level of colonel, you actually paid for every level that you got promoted. But this gentleman was meritorious, so he actually got in on the strength of his mind. So one of the first things that happened to him was when he got commissioned, he was sent to America. He was in the American War of Independence, became a prisoner of war, and then later, after he was released, he was put into the wilds in New Brunswick, which is now part of Canada. And for 9 years, he sat there doing various survey work, demarcating, helping the demarcation of the Canada border and so forth. So that actually determined his character to an extent, because he was in the isolated areas. He was not that much of an outgoing person, but very talented. The person who recognized his talent was a gentleman called Arthur Wellesley, who became the Duke of Wellington. And if you remember the story of the battle of the last battle that Napoleon lost to the Duke of Wellington, it's Arthur Wellesley, who was the British general who ran that. But he was also the gentleman who actually the last battle of Tipu's in Seringapatam. Now this gentleman was the one who took advantage of the need for maps, and he sold the idea to Arthur Wellesley and decided to set up the whole survey, which he got support for. And quietly he also inserted the basic research on the curvature of the earth, which is called geodesy. So he also grew into a gentleman who was scientific in nature. Now look at the background of this man. He starts with some mathematics studies in his grammar school and so forth. But over the years, 9 years that he has been sitting in this isolated area, he becomes quite a person who understands and has got a lot of familiarity with not only higher mathematics, but also astronomy and geodesy. So he's picked up all this knowledge on his own, and this is what Wellesley recognizes. So he took up the survey, And he started this off. The first baseline was drawn in Madras, which is Chennai now, near the racecourse stands. And that's where the whole survey started off. After about 20 years of running this survey, he passed away in a place called, a very remote area called Hinganghat, which is about 50 miles from Nagpur. And in this entire period, he has got married to local women, and he's had his own children. Some of them grew up and joined the survey along with him. But he was actually the interesting part was, despite the fact that he was such a major contributor and the initiator of this serious study, he was actually quite forgotten, and nobody really realized where his grave was. So it's when K.A. went around researching for his novel that he was able to discover where his grave was. So if you see the picture below, that's actually when it's all been cleaned up. And so 2015 picture of his grave, I think they're maintaining it now. The second important character is George Everest himself, who sort of took over in the second half and then took the survey up to its end. He's probably the most complex character in this account. He also started in the the Military Academy in Woolwich. He studied maths, mechanics, but really trained to be an artillery officer. But he was then seconded to the survey. He went very happily, and he was really a lieutenant when he became an assistant to Lambton. But he has a reputation of being what is called a martinet. In today's world, we probably use a different word with an A and H in it. But he's obviously offended a lot of people. He had very difficult relations with many, and he triggered a lot of exits of people in his team. But a very, very tough man. Later, people have quite got accustomed to him and grew a little affection for him. But the interesting part was he finished the survey. He bought the little house you see there in the picture is his place called Hathi Paung, where he went and actually set up the final office and looking over the Doon Valley, where he got the Survey of India office moved. He also became the Surveyor General of India at the same time. Unlike Lambton, he got a lot of recognition and he was knighted. And in fact, his successor, who as the Surveyor General actually used the opportunity when they discovered the height of Mount Everest, which was called Peak 15 at that point. He named it Mount Everest. There is a third person, which is interesting, an Indian called Radhanath Sikdar. He joined this entire survey as a young gentleman at 19. What is called a computer. That these are people involved in doing the complex calculations and the equations that go along with all this survey. He was reportedly a very brilliant mathematician. But the interesting part is, although if you look at all the supplementary commentaries on this book on the net, and a lot of Indian commentaries highlight Sikdar, you actually don't find that much mention in the book, except towards the end. But apparently he was the person who did the final workings that showed that Mount Everest was the highest mountain in the world. There are two pictures that run through the book. One which I admire was, if you see it, all these gentlemen, there was intrepid, there was zeal in completing their assignment, and tenacity to stay on this exercise till it was finished. Just imagine something started like this with a 5-year horizon, but actually it took over 40 years to finish. In this entire period, they had to deal with a lot of challenges in terms of social mores, the geography, frequent illnesses, deaths, and so forth. As you go through, you see necessity becoming the mother of invention. They could only earlier take readings and things during the daytime and in the monsoon period when the skies were clear. But George Everest was a little bit of inventive guy. He started using lights and flares at night. So that helped to explode the surveys into the entire year rather than only in a specific set of months. They used to, in the flat areas of the Gangetic Plain, They had no peaks or no mountains or no large constructions to use for measurement. So they went and actually physically constructed towers and used that for doing the survey. All through this period, Everest, in the 20, 25 or 30 years that he was on this survey or with the project, he was constantly racked by illness and sickness and fever. Yet he would go take 5-year holidays for sick leave, come back, again get back into the job. So all the people, including Lambton, the story that runs through this is the tenacity, the dedication to actually complete this major task. So the other story that runs very quick through this entire book is the passion for accuracy and complex manual computing. At that age, everything was manual. So just imagine in Coimbatore baseline, on a 6-mile measure of a baseline, the difference between their physical triangulation and the physical measurement was only 7.6 inches. That's the kind of accuracy they had. They would use astronomical measurements to verify some of the places. Sometimes they do 300 measurements to do. So a lot of meticulous work, very, very accurate calibration, very, very a lot of care taken to verify everything. In fact, they detected one error and they went back and corrected it and made sure everything was reconciled. And they had a whole team working on the complex mathematics that went with it. So some of the instruments which you see here or some of the measurements are there in the book. Very interesting to understand how this was used, which is what Kay also expands as you go through the book. So in general, you get a lot of, if you read other than outside, there's a lot of commentary on not only on this book, but also on the trigonometric survey itself. So there's a lot of material which actually adds to, after reading this book, we can actually go to such material in the net and get a much more absorbing picture. I tend to use Google Earth a lot to understand topography. I mentioned that in my last review as well. So when you actually look at Google Earth and look at the locations, you actually can physically understand what that person would have gone through. Just for information, the 200th anniversary of the survey was celebrated by the Survey of India. It was observed in India and the UK and other places overseas. I do look for a way to look for free PDFs. Unfortunately, there's nothing available. You can get free PDFs, but you have to go through other things like giving your phone number or your email, which is always a problem nowadays. And you get bludgeoned with a lot of unnecessary information. So it's good to, but I like this book. It looks good and it's wonderful to read. It's about the third time I've read it. I've enjoyed reading it. It is a very, very absorbing account. It's a very important part of our heritage. And more than anything, the curiosity which was triggered in my childhood was actually fulfilled when I was able to pick up this book and finish it. So I would recommend it to anybody to read who is interested in the history of this country. And I'm sure it will be a great pleasure.